Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is Smurfy and today we are covering a topic that I thought I would never actually have to cover, and that is not only is Zoo one of the best decks in the metagame at the moment, but it's also one of the biggest shareholders in the metagame as well. So it's incredibly popular and it's doing very, very well. But things are getting a little bit complicated because everyone's doing the Kavu, Sign of Draco, Leyline package in pretty much everything. And there's a bunch of people that are getting a little bit confused on what version of Zoo they're playing against, what version of Zoo they should be playing. And I just thought I would go through it and what's the best version. So as you've got in front of you here, these are the most recent records, or the top records for the various different Zoo decks that were played at the most recent Legacy event. I mean Legacy, the tournament organizer, not the format. Very, very confusing. But yeah, so it was like a several hundred player tournament and Zoo was, I believe, the most popular deck. And we did actually get a Zoo player into the top 8, which is awesome to see. Love to see Zoo players doing well. And that was on Tomaz, and they were playing Scam Zoo, which is a deck that I believe was actually made by Dak Fade in 07. But yeah, went with a 12-3 record, made it into top 8, but there are also a bunch of other scam lists that did really well as well. So we've got Philip on Blue Zoo, or some people calling it like Murktide Zoo. And then there's also a bunch of people that did like 11-4 or 10-5 records on typical, like what I call traditional domain Zoo. So that these are like the standout Zoo finishes that I saw. I went through all the deck lists and there were some various ridiculous names, so I've just renamed them the 3 just to clarify and show you guys what's actually going on, what decks are doing well. And it turns out all 3 versions of Zoo are doing really well. So you've got Scam Zoo, Blue Zoo and Domain Zoo. But there are some quite distinct differences between the 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the different versions of Zoo overlap and how they differ from each other. Let's just go to the next slide. All right, so this is a nice little graphic Venn diagram, I think is what they're called, that I made for you guys just to make it a little bit clearer. So as you can see, you've got each version of Zoo that's being played at the current time. You've got traditional Zoo at the top, Scam Zoo on the left, and Blue Zoo on the right. And then in the middle, you've got all the cards which go in pretty much all 3 decks. So if you see a Ragavan, a Territorial Kavu, a Sign of Draco, a Leyline Guild Pact, or a Leyline Binding, that could be pretty much any Zoo list. Those are the staples. And then what you've got on the outside are cards that are generally unique to that specific version of Zoo. So traditional Zoo is pretty much the only one playing things like Nishoba Brawler, Wild Nakatal, Tarmogoyf, Stubborn Denial, and Gigantha. Gigantha being a very, very big one there. Scam Zoo and Blue Zoo both play the pitch elementals, so they can't play Gigantha. So if you see a Gigantha, you already know it's traditional Zoo. If you see things like Bowmaster, Grief, Not Dead After All, Thoughtseize, and even Fable, then you know you're probably on. They're going to be on Scam Zoo, and then they've got things like Subtlety, Murktide, Expressive Iteration, Counterspell, and Force of Negation in Blue Zoo. Now, there is a little bit crossover between a few of them with traditional Zoo, but there's not any overlap between Scam Zoo and Blue Zoo that isn't in traditional, if that makes sense. So if you see Tribal Flames, it could be Scam Zoo or Domain Zoo, as you can see on the left. Or on the right-hand side, Preordain and Lightning Bolt can be in both versions of Zoo. But I think that just clarifies with people. It just gives you a little bit of heads up. What are you playing against? It can be a little bit confusing. There is a lot of things going on in Modern. There's been a lot of meta game changes, and I feel that it's that might be a little helpful graphic for players if they're trying to figure out what they're playing around or what they need to be playing around. I think that should narrow it down. So yeah, those are the different versions, yeah, I'll tweet that so people can see it on there as well. Moving on, so let's look into Scam Zoo first. So crazy that Scam Zoo managed to top 8 such a large event. So really well congratulated to Thomas. Sorry how I pronounce your name. But as you can see, we've got the list up in front of you. One thing I did find surprising is Orcish Bowmasters doing well in Modern. I really didn't think that would be doing very well at the moment. Doesn't really seem that like it lines up with too much of the metagame, but what can I say? He's done really well with it. And this is basically just Dak Faden 07's list. just tweaked slightly. I think the biggest variation on here is Hit and Run, which is an absolute spicy card, to say the least. And if you're unfamiliar with Hit and Run, then you basically only need to read Hit most of the time. Target player sacrifices an artifact or creature, and then Hit deals damage to that player equal to its TMC. So there are leyline combos with Sign of Dracos going everywhere. And obviously, Edict effects are really, really good at answering the Sign of Draco because it's hexproof. Well, Hit one-ups that Edict, and it makes them take 12. So if your opponent gets their Dracos into play, and you can remove whatever other crap they put into play somehow, or the stars just align, then you can use Hit and actually make your opponent take 12, and they sacrifice their Draco. So yeah, absolutely love that sideboard tech. Well, I guess in this case, main board tech. Really good way to counter the Draco. I know a lot of people have been complaining about how uninteractive Sign of Draco Leyline of the Guild Pact is, but I think there are actually a lot more ways to deal with it than people give credit. You've got Leyline Binding, you've got Pick Your Poison, any sort of Edict, so Liliana is also seeing a lot more play now as well. Hit and Run, there are tons of things you can do. Or you can counter the creature with things like Subtlety or Counterspell. I think there are a lot of ways you can deal with the Sign of Draco combo. But yeah, as you can see here, other than that, it's basically just Scam and Zoo put in together, and clearly it worked. So yeah, awesome list. Gonna have to give this another go. This was one of the decks that I was testing for the larger Modern event in the UK, which is the Axion Mega Modern series. And I was very, very close to registering this. I ended up going with traditional Zoo instead. Still got a very, very consistent result with the traditional list, but maybe I'll have to give Scam Zoo a little bit more attention. Moving on to Philip, who came 11th, and that was with Blue Zoo. So Blue Zoo is essentially a bunch of Murktide cards put in with Zoo. So you've got the Ragavans, which were in Murktide and in Zoo, and then instead of things like Ledger Shredder or anything like that, you just play 4 Kavu and 4 Sign of Draco, and you then pair that with Murktide Region and a 1 of Subtlety. And then the rest of the cards are pretty much just the best removal spells in Modern, so Lightning Bolt and Leyline Binding. And then you've got one of the best card advantage spells in Modern as well, with Expressive Iteration. And then there's just things like tempo cards in there, so Force of Negation, Counterspell, and Subtlety, just trying to tempo your opponent out. This plays much more like a tempo value game than Scam Zoo, for example, which is I would say probably operating more on a fairer game plan than Blue Zoo is, despite having the Grief combo. I think that Force of Negation and Subtleties backing up a Kavu is probably more unfair, to be honest. But yeah, awesome list. I've seen this being becoming more and more popular. The counterspells in particular seem a little bit weak if there's loads of the main Zoo going around, especially as Yawgmoth and Amulet are doing really well at the moment. But the Subtlety and the counterspells, I think, go a really long way. And also to point out, they are playing Preordain as well. But no Lorient's revealed, which I think could also see potentially a slot or two, just as a good pitch card to Force and Subtlety. But yeah, really sweet list. Very low creature count. So you've only got Ragavan, Kavu, Draco, Murktide, and a 1 of Subtlety. So for a Zoo deck, very light on creatures. And then moving on to 15th place with Nico playing what I call traditional Zoo. Just pretty much exactly the kind of list you would expect if you looked on like a top 8 deck list guide or something. The main difference I think here to what you see generally is there are 2 main deck Inti. Inti is a really good way to get your Kavus and your Dracos bigger than your opponents, because if there's lots of mirror matches, your creatures having 1 extra power and 1 extra toughness makes a big difference. Your Kavus all of a sudden don't trade with their Kavus, they just kill them, for example. And giving it trample is also really nice as well. Getting through opponents, particularly like Yawgmoth, for example, giving your Kavu trample is a very, very big deal in that matchup. Other than that, this is the only list that's running Wild Nakato and Ragavan, so much lower to the ground in that regard, much more early game aggression, and yeah, just what I would prefer to play, I would expect. But all 3 lists are really, really good. I'm very looking forward to playing more of the Blue Zoo. I tried making it work about a year ago without the Sign of Draco, and it just didn't really work. Sorry, not the Sign of Draco, the Leyline of the Guild Pact. But that Leyline being an extra 4 blue cards in your deck does just make it much easier to use your forces and your subtleties. So yeah, those are the different lists. I hope you guys found that informative or entertaining. As someone that loves Zoo, I think it's really important for me to know the different types and what cards overlap and what the strengths and weaknesses are of each version. And hopefully this just makes it a little bit more digestible for people that may not necessarily want to spend a long time looking at different lists. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. I respond to pretty much every comment. I try to, except when people ask me for deck lists. Sometimes I forget and I don't have them on my phone or something. But if you leave an actual question, I will probably answer it. If you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed my content, or you want to learn more about Zoo, feel free to check out my account over on Dictionary. Dictionary is essentially like how people use Patreon with sideboard guides and articles and stuff. But it's just specifically made for Magic, so you can find other content creators on there as well, like Dak Faden, for example. But yeah, I've got a bunch of tiers on there that you can subscribe to. Even the lowest tier, which is only $5, does give you my full access to my domain Zoo guide. I've written articles as well, but the guide is probably the most informative thing for people. But yeah, you've got like a bunch of different stuff I've written on there. The list that I recommend, I do update this as the metagame changes. And then as you can see, there is a full breakdown for every matchup, or at least the main matchups. I can't do every deck in Modern. That would take a year alone. But yeah, basically it just teaches you how to sideboard with Zoo. I keep like a change log of the most recent changes so you guys can see what's updated and what to keep an eye on. And just where I think that things can be changed and all that good stuff. But also, if you just enjoy the content, you don't necessarily have to follow the guide. Maybe you just enjoy the channel and you want to show some support. So that would be really, really awesome. But yeah, if there's any content you want to see on my YouTube channel or on Dictionary, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to provide content that people are interested in. If there's a deck or any gameplay you want to see in particular, let me know. I'm happy to post videos for specific decks. Most recently at the Axion Mega Modern here in the UK, I did have one of the viewers come up to me and specifically request some information about Pump and Dump and how that would fit in the current metagame. So I am currently working on a Pump and Dump list, updated with the new format changes and everything. So stay tuned for that. As requested, I will do a video on it. So yeah, I think that's everything for today. Check out my Dictionary. Make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment if there's anything you want to ask about. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.